that's not how you help people, honestly. It's not how you help like regular people understand wine. Just awful. I mean, honestly, it is one of the most misogynistic places. You do have tasting with it, and they all, pretend like they care what you say. They don't care. Not everybody's wine obsessed, and there's not a whole lot of resources for people who are like not in the industry, not studying for an exam. Main problem actually being a woman in wine is that
I shot this podcast with Elizabeth, the host of the Wine for Normal People podcast. It's become one of the most listened to podcasts in our industry. She is blunt. I like how she gets straight to the point, and we had a lot of fun in this conversation. So let's get to the podcast. Wine for Normal People. What does that actually mean?
I say at the beginning of my book, I define what a normal person is, which is basically just somebody who has a life outside of wine. A lot of the wine books and wine media that are made are for people who are professionals. Even the things that seem like they're not for professionals are often for professionals. So I try to do a hybrid of making sure that I guess what the whole entire thing started because I was a normal wine person. I was working in technology, like in high tech market research, and I really loved wine and I hated everything about it. Like I hated all of the people. I couldn't get access. I mean, this was the early 2000s. It was just really hard. So actually every time that I think about doing something, I'm like, I was really smart. I was young. I was excited. And it was like a lot of people crushed my spirit. So the idea is just like, wine is not your entire life, but it's something you really like. And you're just like a normal person living your life. And this is a way to slip wine in there. I'm not for dummies. Certainly not. You have to have like some brain power to like comprehend what I'm saying. And I try to explain things, but it's explained in so many of the things that I've done. I don't always like do full explanations of things in every show, in every book, but it is important. But I just feel like people are not everybody's wine obsessed, and there's not a whole lot of resources for people who are like not in the industry, not studying for an exam,
Well, I think you hit the point. Like one of my good friends was a master of wine. I remember one impactful thing she said. He says, I don't understand why people feel like they need to know about wine to really enjoy it. I have I'm also on food trips some of the time with like food Instagrammers and stuff. They don't know the history about all these dishes, the culinary history, but they sure as heck enjoy it. You want to touch on that?
Well, I actually do think it's important, which is why I do so much research on it. And I think that the reason it's important is there's a couple of things. First of all, like wine is tied really to human civilization. We have had wine for so long. It's been so much of a part of like political discourse and economics and treaties. And it's been part of social life and, writing and literature. And I mean, it's really integrated, and science, right? Like, so any way that you can get into it and people can kind of connect with it is fantastic. So I do a lot of that. I also think that to understand the history of it is to really appreciate Jesus. Like Bondel's been making wine. Like my podcast was just on Bondel. Like Bondel in like the south of France has been making wine since the ancient Greeks, since the Phocians, not the Phoenicians, the ones who fought the Phoenicians. Like this is a long freaking time. And I think that giving that historical perspective makes you understand you're part of something when you drink wine. It's not like, something like whatever the White Claw.
Well, we're here with Elizabeth Schneider, Wine for Normal People podcast. There's been some pushback recently in the industry. I think people got too into the idea of simplifying, demystifying wine and kind of made it too simple. Like I know some other professionals like, actually, I don't think that we should completely simplify wine because it is a complex subject.
Yep.
But then again, it leaves, like you were talking about, it leaves the consumer, and me too. I was in your position, and we actually have similar paths in terms of our coming to love for wine. But you got to find a bridge somehow. I think that's what you're doing really well. You want to touch on that?
Well, I don't think that I try to demystify wine or try to simplify it. What I try
which you don't. Your podcast is like kind of a misnomer. But go ahead.
It's both. I mean, it's both. It's for people who are already. You can't. It works on many different levels. But I'm not trying to take away the mystery of wine. I think wine is a very, very like mysterious and cool thing. I'm just trying to explain things, right? I'm taking very difficult concepts and trying to make them available to people who aren't in this industry. That's really, like, I always say this, like, the one skill that I've had, whether I was like, I worked for Reebok, like, I've done all of these, I've done a lot of different jobs. And I always get put in positions where people are like, communicate this hard thing and make other people be able to understand it. That's not simplifying, dumbing down, any of that. All it is explaining things to people who are not in the trade. And I will tell you, I don't have a lot of connections. I don't have the connections you have. I am not friends with Masters of Wine. I am not in the sommelier community. I am not in any of that. Actually, my community is the community I built. And then I have a bunch of friends. I guess they're in media, some are in marketing, a lot of producers. That's like who I hang out with. I would rather be in that world. I was once told by a very, very prestigious, I will not tell you who, wine columnist, that I was shooting myself in the foot by not playing the game. And and this individual was a very nice person, but he did not understand what I was doing. And I think he still doesn't to this day understand what I'm doing. And I sort of, after that, lost a lot of respect for him, because I was like, you actually write for consumers, and yet you're okay with going to all the bougie things and drinking all these wines and doing all this stuff. And you don't actually talk to people. Like, you talk to your own little inner circle in this big city that you're in. And I mean, that's not how you help people, honestly. It's not how you help like regular people understand wine. The way to do it is to like befriend them, understand what their challenges are, and make it easy for them to understand, but also to understand they're not stupid. So that's like, that's
so like real market research and like a real business.
You understand what I'm saying? I think that dumbing down that people are complaining about is like that everything has to be a picture and everything has to be, and then you make these grapes and the wine is then pink. Like, you don't actually explain it to people when people are actually curious about it. They want to know why like rosé is pink. How did it get that way? You know, like, and a lot of people don't understand that. And then when you explain it to them, they're like, wow, that's really cool. That's like very technical. Yeah. Wow. You know?
What? Excuse me. I still have a cold. I didn't think I would be able to do this podcast because I was lost my voice for a few days. I'm still a little bit, well, maybe I sound better because I'm deeper now, but let's talk about like what, you know, you've built a real strong community, which I find impressive because I'm also doing alternative media, so to speak, even though I have done traditional media in the past. What do you find that, you know, the normal people or your crowd, what is it that they really want when it comes to wine or wine information?
You know, honestly, I think that the strength of the community that I built, and, you know, my Patreon community is just unbelievable. It is a group of people that actually get together in real life with each other. They form real friendships and bonds. And I can tell you that I know that there are people that are so politically divergent, that have very different religious views, that have very different lifestyles, and they all come together around wine. Now, some of that is that I've been very strict about the rules of the community, and people know that I enforce it. And I have thrown people out of the community for not behaving properly and being kind to each other. But people just want an environment where they can hear about wine and to dork out about it, because they don't have these people in their lives. Again, the wine community, I don't know what's going on right now. I mean, the zeitgeist of like wine and health and all I mean, it's just a bizarre moment in time. I think it's so weird. I mean, the fact that this could ever happen now is so bizarre, but it is happening. And young people are like eschewing many things that give pleasure to their lives. And it's like, as that happens, you get fewer and fewer people in your life who like wine. And then you can go online to this community. They all know that like I have this certain attitude, and I attract all these people that are very similarly minded. You know, I do these trips to Italy. These people wind up becoming like really good friends afterwards, staying in touch with each other and stuff like that, because we're all of a mind and we all love it. And like, you know, it's nice to be the leader of something like that and to make sure that we're staying cohesive. The key to that is just to make sure, like, whenever I go into a city, I try to get together with people. And I'm really about like doing online events when I can, but when I had an event for 45 or 50 people in Washington, D.C., where we all just got together, drank some wine. Everybody brought some wine. I brought a bunch of wine, and we just hung out. People exchanged phone numbers. They realized they live close to each other. They're hanging out now. To me, that's the most important thing, is to find a common ground and to make it real. Like, I don't just take this community and say, like, I've taken it another step further. I've always tried, since I started this, to get together with fans, but now I want them to get together with each other. So I think it's really important, like really fostering these interactions. Where else are you going to get that? So that's kind of part of the value that I think I also provide, because I'm not, I think it's like very Gen X of me. I'm like, let's get together in real life. Like, let's get off the phones. Let's get off the.
Well, that's the beauty. That's the beauty about wine. I always feel like wine, the most important thing is it keeps the people that you love or you like or you want to have conversations with at the dinner table longer. That's the real purpose of wine. But you hit on a lot of like real just social principles. You're saying that your community wants to be heard, they want to feel safe, and they want to get together.
Yeah.
Right?
And they want to be accepted by each other and have a place to oh my God, like we joke around where everybody's just, it's fun, it's lighthearted, but also, there's room for debate if you want to debate things, but it never gets ugly. Like some of the, like, if you ever gone on some of those like blogs or the wine forums, it's like, geez, God, it's wine. Stop, just stop it. Like, stop.
At the end of the day, we forget, like we get geek, and I'm as geeky as anybody, but it is fermented grape juice. At the end of the day, what now, the community you built, you attract a certain tribe, a certain vibe. When you get these people, when people come together, your audience, like, the normal people, normal wine drinkers, how geeky do they really want to go? How much info, like Robert Joseph, who we know really well, one of his best lines, he wrote an article last year, said the wine industry does not need more education. It needs more seducers. People that make wine
both. Yeah, I agree. So I think that the seductive nature of it is that goes along with what we were talking about before. When you start to tell people that wine is farming, I like just met with somebody a couple days ago, and like he knew nothing about wine. We were networking in another context, and like he knew nothing about wine. And I said to him, like, well, that wine is just farming, right? This blew this guy's mind. Like, he could not. This was like, could he just, what, like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, yes, the people that I'm friends with are farmers. That's who I am friends with, farmers. Like, they get on tractors and they're talking to their vines and like dealing with nature every day. And I think that is a concept that we do a horrible job of. And the seduction is not about beautiful, properties in the Napa Valley, but it's more about, like, again, part of it is, God, you realize that if you drink this, the thread of human civilization, there's something very, very, visceral about, for many people, about connecting this thing that's been made in this certain place for thousands upon thousands of years, and you get it, right? You have this. Yeah. This has been in Spain, right? This has been in Australia, and here it is. It's on my table. This bottle was touched by somebody that was there. And when you start to talk about that, I guess maybe I am a bit of like a seducer in that way, but I do it through education. So I think that, like, maybe it's not so much, Robert and I love to debate, so I don't know, he would probably fight with me on this point, but I think it's about telling a story in a way that is factual, interesting, not salesy. I think that's a big problem, because most of the people doing education are also trying to sell wine. I'm not trying to sell any wine to you. I mean, unless I'm in a wine Access is my sponsor. So like, if I'm trying to do a video for that, that's different. But I'm not trying to sell you wine on the podcast. I'm just telling you about it. If you want, it's yours for the taking. I mean, that's the other thing that I always say, like, there's lots of like haters on the, as you I'm sure you well know.
No,
on the internet,
the wine industry, come on.
Well, I love that. Like some of the comments, I'm like, Jesus Christ, like we're in that. And how about this? It's free. And if you don't like my voice, you don't like my opinions, and you don't like how I do things, you can turn it off. There you go. Right. But right. It's very, very easy to do. Just it's like an off button, just turn it off. Right. But
no, it's easier. It's easier to type a hating comment. That's what.
Oh, much easier. You have to go open the app, like type it in. No, it's really, like, to me, it is one of these things where it's like, yes, I mean, I do see what Robert is saying. I'm not sure about seducers, but certainly people who can make the stuff more appealing. And if that's what he meant by that, I absolutely agree. And I do think that I am sort of part of that set, because what's appealing about, I think, what I do, I think, is that I can talk to you and make you understand something that's really, really difficult and then make you excited to try it. Not because I'm trying to sell you a brand, but because I'm so excited about it. Like, I want to tell you about it. And like, I really want you to try this. Like, I really want you to see what sherry is. We're going to find you one you like, finally. I got so excited in my Cabernet. I teach online classes, live online classes. And
Mhm.
like in my Cabernet class, I finally found a Chilean cab that two of my regular class takers loved. And I was like, I told you guys that this is not all green peppery, whatever. That is the most exciting moment for me ever. I don't care who the producer is, but the fact that they were able to find that, and they're like, I'm going to buy this one and I'm going to keep looking. That's great. And again, if you want to call
Wow.
that a seducer, call it whatever you want. I just call it like so excited that like I found something that these people, another thing, like changing people from red wine drinkers to white wine drinkers. Oh my God, it's like the joy of my life. I love it.
Oh, me too. I definitely let's touch back on that. We'll touch more like on what you're drinking as your styles has changed. I think it's semantics, and it's you are definitely a seducer, and seduction is not about beautiful people, beautiful vineyards, vineyard place. It's about if you have an audience and you make it fun because you pull people. I mean, that's the
Right.
basis of advertising, the psychology of advertising. Let's go before what you're drinking because we have similar, even though I've never met you in person. I've listened to your podcast. I know a little bit about you from website. We kind of started out our love for wine kind of when you went to Italy during school. When I
Hmm.
backpacked through graduate school through Italy, that's when I fell in love. So I picked an appropriate wine to drink due to, but you have something your friend makes, right? So what do you
I
actually
do.
drinking?
So I have actually, this is something that's made, it is a grape that is grown widely in the southern part of Italy, but I am drinking Nalle Zinfandel, estate
AKA
old vine,
Primitivo.
aka Primitivo, or Soljenic Castellensky, if you want to
Shirley
go all the way
Kastellensky
back, right?
or
But
Tribidrag or Kretosia.
right, right. So yeah, my friends Andrew and April Nall and make this. I've worked harvest at them before. It's really, they make. I think it's such beautiful Zinfandel because it's much brighter and fresher. They keep the alcohols low. They pick really at a great time, before the Zin gets really plummy. So it's more on the raspberry spicy side, and the alcohol is not high. And look, they make like 4,000 cases of wine a year, if that. And they are just a family-run winery, and those are the people that I like to support. So that's what
So
I'm
is it
drinking
like
today, and it's
let's
tasty.
let's let's get granular a little bit. Let's get a look. You get to show off your geekiness here. I'm a fan of Zin when it becomes more lean, more Shetnuff to pop, more Rony.
Yeah,
Not when
that's
it becomes
yeah,
jam juice. That's what
yeah,
that is.
yes, yeah.
What's the retail on that?
This is I think this might be 35, maybe $40. It's expensive because this is their estate old vines. So they've
Yeah.
got vines that are pushing like 100 years old on the estate, which is when Zinfandel gets pretty interesting and delicious. So yeah, they this is from the 1927 block. So it's almost 100 years old, and really they are so meticulous, but again, only small producers can do that. And right now, the small producers are struggling so hard. So I'm happy to support them and drink
Of
this
course.
very delicious wine. But I think you would like this one if you like the more restrained style of Zin. Zin's gone way in the other direction. Yeah.
What's the alcohol on that? 14.5? I
I
mean,
think
Zin's rarely go.
it's 14. Yeah, they never make
Let,
wines that are more than 14. Zinfandel is
let
more than
let
14.
let's talk about the genesis of where you fell in love with wine because it's really where I got really it was Italy. Let's talk about you first. Where do you remember where you were in Italy studying? Do you remember what grape or even a wine, or is it just wine and food in general being in Italy?
I mean, it was more of like a cultural moment that sparked me. It wasn't like I wasn't old enough or more or mature enough or sophisticated enough to really learn anything about wine at that time. I was 20 years old. We had wine every night with
You
dinner. I
look
was like,
like you're 22. What are you talking
oh,
about?
thank you. I was, I I was studying abroad, and it was just like wine was everywhere. And at a certain point in time, you're like, oh, well, there's access. I mean, this is like why I'm always like to my kids, I'm like, if you guys want to drink wine, go ahead. Don't arrest me if you're listening to this and you're in law enforcement. Because I'm like, I just like, I thought, okay, well, now you can get past this. This stuff tastes really good with food, and it's ubiquitous. It's everywhere. It's like olive oil. At that point, I didn't really know that olive oil could taste like that either. And so all of these cultural things started to happen to me in the semester that I was away. And the thing that actually really happened there is that I started sort of my lifelong love affair with Italy. I've been there now. I lead tours there now. So I will be there. My 10th trip there is in April, and I continue to go. I have another trip in Sicily in the fall, so I go all the time there, and I did not fully appreciate it, but what it did was just put the idea that wine was something more than like special occasion or something
Mm,
that you have, for champagne or something like that. It was like, shoot, this stuff's everywhere. It's not like super fancy, and it's something that you can enjoy. So when I got back, I still was like totally unsophisticated. But as soon as I graduated college, I was in Boston, and I was looking for things to do. And so I started to go to wine tastings. And the first wine tastings that I went to, of course, were Italian wine tastings, because it was something I was comfortable with. I had sort of spoken the language a little bit. And it was something that I felt like, okay, I was afraid of France. So Italy was much more accessible to me. And it was another way for me to connect with this great experience that I'd had when I was studying abroad, like all of the art history and all of that. Like I still am such a nerd about like the art, and I love but I love all of it. It's all tied in together. It's all this like aesthetic. I just told my dad this. I'm sorry. I'm like going on and on
no,
this
this is
answer.
great. This is great. Actually, go ahead.
So I have this theory, and I really just come to it because I've had a very like introspective year. And one of the things that I realized, and I was thinking about, my dad also, like, what are like sometimes he and I both get irritated at like things that we see or hear, and or bad food, like things like that, and we get very excited when we have a great meal or a good dessert or some piece of art or some scenery is absolutely beautiful. And I said to him, I've realized something. We are people, and when I say this, I'm talking about pretty much anybody that likes wine too, because I really extrapolate this. We are people who are unique because we live a life of the senses. And most people do
Mm,
not live a life of the senses. So it is incredibly important that we say it's not about beauty, but it is about beauty, because people who love wine are sensory. We want to taste things. We want to feel a certain way. We want to see beautiful things. We want the world to be a world of the senses. We immerse ourselves in this so that we can feel. And that is a very different life than someone who, and I'm not saying that they're mutually exclusive, because I also read a lot of books and I'm a nerd, and all that kind of stuff. But it's an incredibly different view of the world from someone who is just about the brain, right? And we don't live in that world. And what I find is really interesting is, there's a lot of like doctors in my community. There's a lot of, and those, doctors and lawyers. But what I notice about them is they also do things like photography, or they do baking, or they do something else. They've got a whole other life behind this, because they are also people who are sensory, right? They love hearing beautiful things and seeing beautiful things and tasting beautiful things. And this is such a different life. And I think that's one of the things that like wine can do to bring people together. We don't necessarily call it out. And this is something like a theory I sort of just popped into my head. But I really do think that all the people that I know who are really into wine, including the people who listen to my show, they're all feeling and seeing this. This is something that we have that a lot of people don't. And they don't get us either. They do not understand why the hell we're so into this, because they want to do like, I don't know, build like train models or do whatever. I don't know.
or play
What people
Roblox.
do with their play Roblox, right? Like, I don't know what people do with their time, but like, I'd rather meditate on a glass of wine, and then but then I'm feeling, I'm sniffing, I'm looking, I'm doing all these things, right? It's a life that you live in the senses. It does take a certain passion, because you have to feel it, right? Like it's inside of you in a certain way. It's a really odd thing. I'm sorry, I just sort of went off on
No,
that.
that's great, because I know me personally, I'm a man, right? I'm not as in, I think women are more in touch with their intuition, their emotions, their senses are more sensual. I know that me getting into wine, transitioning into getting in wine has made me much more present, much more open to myself, much more open to the world, a much better cook. Not that I'm a great cook by any stretch. It's really a magical thing. Where did you study in Italy? Because that can give me a guess about what kind of wine.
Florence.
Oh, of course, it was
Yeah.
Sangiovese, because
Yeah.
that's my first wine love, and my palate has never wavered. I'm
Oh,
drinking
lovely.
I'm
Yes.
drinking Castello de Montespertoli Riserva.
Hmm.
So it's Chianti Montespertoli, which is one of the
Yes.
geeky appellations. I actually did a Sangiovese real, because my favorite wine grape, viewers of channel like, and I had like this $100 Sangiovese I was maybe going to open for this. I was like, it's wine for normal people. This is a $29 wine. That's exceptional. I mean,
Well, again, wine for normal people doesn't mean we don't drink nice wine. It just means we explain it. We explain it better.
Well, let's talk about this, because I have my own philosophy on it. Because let's talk about price quality, because you're dealing with it. I have a certain philosophy when it comes to where you're getting the most bang for your buck. You do a great job on your show, some of your solo episodes where you're actually recommending wines or styles to try. What kind of price points, or what are you telling people about price and quality in wine?
Well, it depends, right? Like, because there's some regions where it's just expensive to make wine. I mean, you're not
Yeah.
going to get a cheap champagne. I guess you could if you're in Europe, but like you can't really make, it's difficult to make wine cheaply in Champagne because of all of the procedures. It is difficult to make wine cheaply in Montalcino because it is so small and hard to farm, right? So there are places where you have to pay for it, but there are other places where price is not at all having to do with quality. And I just mentioned Chile. I mean, could you get better Cabernet Sauvignon for less money? I'm not really sure you can, except out of Bordeaux, which is a complete misnomer. I think the best values in wine are in Bordeaux.
It's still the best. That and Chianti Classico are still some of the best fine wine values in the world. Or I just had
I think Bordeaux blows Chianti Classico away, because I
No,
think the
I agree.
price
I
that
agree
you
with
can pay
you.
for Bordeaux is like it's pennies on the dollar for a really great Bordeaux. I mean, like my favorite producers, their best wines are like $50 because they're part of this caste system where they can't get more than that. So like, that's the best, and it's really freaking delicious wine. You can lay it down, you can do all sorts of things, but they can't get any more money for it because of the caste system that is Bordeaux. So I think there's some of that, but there is definitely, I mean, like the Finger Lakes, ridiculous value for the money, right? Germany, also ridiculous value. Yeah,
Germany.
insane,
God.
right? Austria,
Recently,
those prices are creeping up. I mean, south of Italy, there's so many places where like, and the south of France, I mean, the Rhone, ridiculous value for the money, even Alsace. So yes, there's a ton of places, Spain, anywhere people speak Spanish or Portuguese, you're going to get amazing value. But yes, it does not have to do, a lot of it has to do with the economics of the particular area, right? Like Rioja, right now I just did a series on Rioja, and it's actually pretty depressing, but they're underpaying the growers. These growers can't actually earn a livable wage, which is disgusting and horrible in my opinion. But it does mean that you can get really high quality Rioja for nothing.
My philosophy is, I talk about this on my channel a lot. Like, if people want to step up, like, economics is different with inflation, prices rising, but you can get beautiful wines at $15 if you fight hard and find for it. I just tasted a great Bordeaux Carmensac for $12.99. 2020 is excellent, but I think you want to drink really well. When you drink 25 to 50, regardless, you can drink some of the greatest wines in the world. When you go above
Fantastic
50,
stuff.
when you go above 50, there are diminishing returns depending on the region, stuff like that. It can be really good, could be not as good. The wines a lot of times need to be aged, but 25 to 50, I'm talking, if you have a great relationship with a shop owner, or what you're looking for, you can drink some of the greatest wines in the world, in my opinion.
Yep. I mean, there's a cadre of wines over like 100, but I think once you get to 150, there's literally no difference. I mean, like, I think it's a lot of that is your drinking status. I mean, there's not a whole
That's
lot of,
mostly.
yeah.
Well, I like on the channel, I do. I'm supplied by samples. That's how I do my content. But I have
Yeah.
videos where $15 wines beat $300 wines and blind tastings because I do everything blind. I drink with collectors, like high end collect. I'm the youngest guy in the group, and this is another crappy thing about the wine industry. All my wine friends in the U.S. versus Europe are all, all boomers, 70s,
Mm-hmm.
80s. We're in Europe. The people in the industry are a little bit younger because wine's a little bit more affordable and they grew up with it. But I love in my collector group, we drink some serious wines, but we taste everything blind,
Right.
and that takes a lot. That's when you start to realize it's just like any luxury good. There's
Right.
supply and demand factors into play. I mean,
It's
what do like you're interacting with the community? Are you seeing that a lot where people are like, I splurged, I tried to buy this $150 wine, I didn't like it that much.
no, I don't see that.
Okay.
No, I don't actually hear that often.
If you want to hang out with me and other wine geeks, check out channel memberships. I have several tiers, but in the Grand Reserve tier, every month I do a live hangout tasting where you can come up on the screen, share your thoughts, your wine. Members also get access to some behind the scenes videos and replays of those live hangouts. It also supports the work I do here, so thank you so much. Now, let's get back to the video.
But hold on a second. Remember that the community that I am involved, again, like the whole normal person thing, these people are very educated. And most of the people who join my community and who are interacting with me are people that have been with me for many years. The podcast is 14 years old. So I have people that have been with me for many years, people that have been with me and listened to every single episode I've ever done, and there are 548. So there are people like, so they know, I mean, over the years they have taken my advice, and I'm fairly consistent. I mean, my palate has gotten better, but I don't think I'm pretty consistent about it. So if I tell them this is worth the money, then that is when they will generally trust it. And the only reason that I say it is because, like, I've had the experience. I can't tell them that unless I've had the experience. But I will tell you, like, there's a big difference in like Chateauneuf de Pape between $150 and 25. So yeah.
Or you can't even find Shatnoff in the U.S. at 25 anymore unless it's
Trader
Kirkland.
Joe's has it.
Yeah, Trader Joe's. I want to touch back on something you said because it really hit home to me. You said you get really excited when you transition red wine drinkers to white wine, which I'm more of a white wine drinker than I started out. Red is the only serious wine. And then when I started falling in love with Riesling and then white Burgundy, I'm like, I mean, I'd rather drink Riesling and champagne than anything else if I'm drinking.
Yep.
Talk a little bit about that because that's kind of a misnomer. People think that reds are only serious. And I'm glad that you touched on that.
Well, that's changing so much right now. I don't know. Again, wine is this thing of trends. I am not a trendy person, so it's hard that is something that's difficult for me in this industry. I don't get it. Maybe I'm just like dense, but I just don't get, I don't get it with clothing too. Like, I just wear classic things, right? For me, like, the classics are the things that are very important. And so, yeah, I mean, my first wine, the first like huge wine for me was Alsace Riesling. It was a Trimbach Alsace Riesling in a class. I took a really amazing
we're the
class.
same. We're the
right. I took a wine tasting class. The guy's name was John Miller. He worked for a distributor in Boston. I wish I could find him again, but he has the most common name of anybody in the entire world, so I will never find him. I don't even know who the distributor was because it was through the Boston Center for Adult Education. And he whipped out all these wines, and I was like, what the hell is this? This is wine? Because all I've had is like Chardonnay and Pinot Grigio and stuff like that. I was like, well, okay, it's okay. And I did like Italian reds, but I think when you start to move into the world of whites and you understand, like, there isn't a whole lot obscuring these wines. So when you taste them, there's so much purity in a way in what's happened. Yes, I mean, like, there's winemaking that goes on, but you really do have an opportunity to taste like this sort of like the veil between you and the vineyard is very thin. It's a sheer veil. Like, you get to sort of see what that place tastes like through wine. White wine making is very simple relative to red wine making. I mean, yes, people can play with yeast, they can play with oak, they can play with malolactic fermentation, but even with all of that, a lot of times you're still going to get the pure essence of the grape, because once oak starts to play a role, or you have long aging, things are going to change. But I think when people taste whites, they can be very excited. And then the other thing that I've tried to show people is that if you don't like something that has a lighter body, my favorite fuller bodied white is Fiano di Avellino or
Oh,
Chateauneuf de
it's one of
Pont
my.
Blanc, right?
Oh yeah.
You know, I mean, I'm leading a tour through Campania. Never in all my born days did I think there would be enough people interested in Campania for me to go
Great
visit
region.
Campania. And we filled that trip in about 30 seconds. I mean, people, because of my experience in Campania, the fact that it is a wonderful, unbelievably underestimated place. Aglianico is important there, but Fiano and Greco and Falanghina, I mean, these are the big grapes there. But it's not just that. It's Suave Classico. It's a lot of the Italian whites that have these fuller, richer bodies. And then you have these beautiful French wines from Alsace, and you have the bolder wines from the Rhone. So, and then even Bordeaux Blanc can be rich, So when you start to transition people from red to white, and you show them, here's a Côte du Rhône Blanc, it's $16, and just
Great.
try it. Immediately people go, oh wait, what? Like, we're Suave, like they're, oh really? And then you can start to show them stuff like other weird stuff like last night I went out to dinner with a friend, and I ordered a Kerner from Alto Adige, and she was like, what is this? I was like, there we go. So that's kind of exciting. She was like, I need to take a picture of this. I have to have more of this wine in my life. I mean, that's, all it takes is just a little bit of kindness, a little bit of gentleness, like to sort of just tell people, like, I understand you don't like this, but let me just put your trust in me for this. I promise you that it's not, there are things that you can try, and then it just winds up going on. This Fiano is usually the first wine I can transfer people over on, but you can do it with lots of different things, and it's exciting for them. Riesling is not for everybody. We know that. We're Riesling.
Yeah. Weinbach Grand Cru Riesling was what turned me into whites. But
Ooh.
a lot of people, big misnomers, like in the relative history of wine, we're talking about the relative history of wine. White wines were much more prestigious for a long time, and white wines
absolutely, and sweet wines.
Oh, you don't even. I am hardcore to sweet wines, but we'll touch on that. But people don't understand that. You talk to any winemaker, producer, I'm in the cellar a lot. White wines are much harder to make than reds, especially if you're going to make
they're much harder to make
clean.
well.
Yes.
They're easy to make. They're hard to make well.
Especially if you're going to make crispy whites that are going to be dependable and clear. Not talking about orange wines or macerated wines. And I'm glad that you touched on Campania, a region that I go to about 2 or 3 times a year. I'll be back in May for the Anteprima. And Fiano is one of my favorite white grapes in Italy, maybe the world. I find let's touch on this because we have a love for Italy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in Italy often. I'm in Italy anywhere from 5 to 10 times a year. I love that Italian white grapes because if you just vinify them in stainless steel, no oak, nothing, they're so unique and delicious because there's so many different varieties. You wanna touch on that because I'm sure you have a love for Campania, which is a white wine
but
region.
The Campania, yes, I mean, I would say that Fiano is not one of those wines. They do skin contact with Fiano, and they do lees contact as well to get it to be what it can be. So I wouldn't say that that's a wine that it's just they just pop and pour it. It's definitely not like that. I would say, Rorero maybe a little bit more like that, where they don't do so much skin contact. But I think, I think the traditions of winemaking, I mean, Campania, they do keep it simple. I mean, they do what they can. I mean, I also do think that white wine, it's like one of the things you mentioned, skin contact wine, which drives me crazy because I don't like it. I've tried 100 million times. And
when we get together in person, I will bring you a few to try. Well, you don't have to like them.
No, but I guess the thing that I would like to say about that is that almost every white wine is a skin contact wine also, because they do a little bit of skin contact, especially in Europe. So you are getting some of that effect. I mean, like, you wouldn't get a Gewürztraminer to have that flavor, or
All
Fiano
the
to have
flavors
that
are in the
flavor.
skins.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like without a brief period of skin contact. So I do hate that. Like, just look, I'm a very like practical person. So one of the things that drives me crazy is any of these movements where it's like, no, we're the only ones that do blah, like natural wine, crazy. It has no definition. It doesn't mean anything. So if you're talking about farming, and you're talking about good farming and trying to protect the land and soil regeneration, I'm all in. But you can't also say that someone who's doing sustainable farming, which may actually in some cases be better for the environment than biodynamics, is a bad person and you're not allowed in our movement. And you also can't say that someone who is making wine in a way where they want their wine clear and they want it free of bacteria is like a bad person. They're not necessarily adding additives. This whole idea of additives in wine, I mean, what small producer has the money? I mean, this is the one thing that my producer friends tell me all the time. We don't have that kind of cash. The people that are doing that are the large wineries. Those are the people in the grocery store. They're doing that. We don't have that kind of cash. We can't afford that. We can afford like nutrients for the yeast, cultivated yeast. We can afford SO2 to keep, microbial spoilage away. We can afford fining agents. That's pretty much it. Like once you start to get into all this other stuff, it's just adding cost. So small producers don't do that, but they're also not going around telling everybody like we're natural wine, we're better than you. Like they just don't do that kind of stuff. But then they get painted with this brush, which I do not like. I don't like any of the purist movements. I think they're ridiculous. I used to. If you listen to my early shows, I was like, oh, whatever, and high alcohol. I used to be obsessed with that. And I think it's just am I allowed to curse?
You can say whatever you want.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, it's just
I drop F bombs once in a while. That's okay.
I'm just going to say bullshit because it is absolute bullshit. The purest arguments of anything is a bunch of bullshit. If you're trying to save your crop because the rain has come and you're going to lose your livelihood, you won't make wine next year. I don't care how pure it is. Spray it with something so that you can survive another year. This is just the economics of it. We just have to be practical. And you know what? Sometimes I'm not saying use Roundup or something that's going to cause cancer, but there's plenty of things that people can do that maybe wouldn't be considered purist arguments, but are things that will save their business, save their livelihood, and then in the years that they can work organic or biodynamic, great. But this is why a lot of people don't get certified who work that way, because they don't want to worry about it. I mean, if you're in the freaking Loire Valley or you're in a place that's very rainy, you don't want to have to worry about, oh my God, we filled out all the paperwork and now we're certified organic and now we can't do it because the rains came and now we're going to lose all our, I mean, no, that's just not reality. People have to live. And these ideas that everything has to be pure, it's not based in reality at all, so I don't, yeah.
I like it. Let's shift gears a little bit with Elizabeth Schneider, Wine for Normal People podcast. The reason I wanted you on the show is because you're one of the leaders, I think, of new media. Obviously, what I'm doing on YouTube, the traditional wine writer is a dinosaur. I've been a wine writer. I still write once in a while, but not very often. Talk about maybe your experience that you've been podcasting for quite some time.
Yep.
And its role and it's unique because wine is a sense like people can listen to the information and maybe hear some of the descriptions, but wine is a sensory thing. It's a personal thing.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about the role about what you've seen podcasting, especially you started in the podcasting in the early days. Now podcasting is like really blowing up. Talking about
I
your
think it's already
experience.
had its blow up, and I think it's actually, podcasting is a very interesting medium. I fell into it because I have to absolutely give credit to Rick Breslin, who was my first co-host, he said we should start a podcast, and I was like, what are you talking about? He ran the Hello Vino app. I think he still does, and really nice guy. And I had been doing some writing for him, and he was like, I was talking to him about my goals of trying to bring the message of like easy to understand wine education, but not for dummies, to people. And he was like, we should start a podcast. So in the early days, he was my co-host for like probably the first 6 months, 8 months, something like that. And then he got busy with other things, but he and I are still friendly.
Mhm.
And at that point, nobody ever blogs. Everything was blog, blog, blog. And I had a blog also. But then, it just started to grow. It's always been organic. One of the things that I've never done like an advertising campaign. I've never done marketing. I haven't done, Facebook ads for anything except like my classes if I'm trying to fill them up. Like I've
Yeah.
never done any of that. And because again, I'm all about community and I also have a strong personality. And I also am a woman
No.
I'm also a woman in wine, and a lot of people, again, I'm not going to say much more about it than to say that like there are some people that really do not like being taught by women in wine. They really do not like it, and they feel angered by a woman in wine having a voice and having a powerful voice and having opinions. And I have borne the brunt of that many times from people just saying disgusting and horrible things about how I'm stupid and uneducated. And, that is certainly, I don't believe to be the case, but you hear it, and it's podcasting. And I one time went to a, podcasting seminar with a bunch of women, and the stories were exactly the same. Doesn't matter your industry. So when people hear it, it can be very jarring, and they don't like hearing women with strong opinions. So, and my podcast is a mix of opinion, because I think part of educating people is it's not just like the straight
That's
up
why Parker
facts,
got big, because he had an opinion. Opinion
but
is
it's
very
also
important.
helping people interpret what it is, right? I mean, I worked in the wine industry. I have an MBA, and I went and worked in the wine industry for 4 years for a very, very large thing. And that was an education in and of itself. It was enough for me to understand. And I have a lot of friends from that period of time who are very high up at other companies, and I know the fabric of how things work. So I try to bring that also into my work, because I have an understanding of how this industry works in a way that a lot of people do not understand that. So when I got into new media, it was, okay, how do I use this platform to have a voice? You have to have a voice. You have to have something. You have to be like sort of have a personality. No one's
Yeah.
interested in like boring crap, and also like revealing some parts of yourself, even if they're ugly or whatever. People know tons of stuff about my personal life, not necessarily in the broader audience, but Patreon, God, those people know everything about my life, right? So like, this is part of it. It's a personal new media. I feel like in a lot of ways is about having a personal connection. It does suck. I think that's part of the reason, we talked about this offline right before we recorded. I don't like to do video. I feel very vulnerable and exposed when I do video, because I've had enough of a difficult time with my voice, but then also now bringing in, my face and my person, I don't think I'm too thin skinned, frankly, to do what you do. So good on you. I mean, I'm going to try a little bit more of it, but it's really difficult. I think that's the thing about new media, is that you really are forced to bring some of yourself into it, and not in a fake way. Like, I'm not Dick Clark, I'm not putting on a radio voice. I don't do that. So like, if I'm telling people something, I'm telling them because I have done extensive research on it. I have interpreted it. I've been in this industry for 20 years, right? Like, and I've traveled all around. So when I'm bringing something to bear, it's not out of nowhere, right? But it is out of a sense of like, I have been a lot of places and spoken to a lot of people, and I'm trying my best to bring that to you in a way that's authentic and exciting and something that I can stand behind. I am like a no machine. People pitch me to be on my show constantly. And one of the reasons that my audience, the people that do like me, is because I don't have people on I don't know. I do not. I mean, you have to come with a reference, or you have to be somebody that I know. Somebody that I've met. I don't want you on the show unless you can be part of our family and part of our tribe. That's the difference between new media and old media. So I don't feel that I'm talking at people. I feel like I'm talking to people, and that the community is another way for me to extend that. That's part of the new media, is to say like, And since the beginning, we've always like, I've always done that. Like, what do you guys think? Would you like to hear a show on blah?
Mm.
Absolutely. Let's do that. Let's do a class on this. Let's do, you know, it's not about me. It's about them. I don't care. Like, what do I care? I mean, it doesn't, sometimes I do shows and they're like a complete, I'm sure they're a miss, but like, that's, it's usually because it's something that I was interested in. I wasn't listening. New media, I think, is about involving the audience and understanding, like, I think, unfortunately, we all, I think those of us who do this are like, oh, wouldn't it be nice if everyone liked us? I mean, we all feel that way. It's not like people, it's not like we love to say like, oh, I don't care if you don't like me, but it does hurt. It doesn't feel good when somebody's like, you're stupid, you're an asshole, I hate you, you think you're so great. No, I don't. I absolutely do not. Trust me. Like, no one is a harsher critic of Wine for Normal People than me. But I spend most of my time just trying to think like, what would Tina like? What would Claudette like? What would Brian like? Like, if I do a show, would Pat in the southwest of France like that? Like, these are the things that I think. And I think that's the difference between the way things used to be and the way things are now. Because Robert Parker would send out his newsletter to, and I'm sure he'd hear back from his buddies, but I hear from them every day. Like, I will get like, hey, that was really great. I loved when you said that. And, again, because I have a supportive, unbelievably awesome community, if there's criticism, people are super nice about it. But like most of the time, they're just receptive and they're like, whoa, I had no idea that this was like this. And thank you. And that's what normal wine people want, right? They want somebody who's going to give them something new and exciting and interesting every week and give them like a little gift of escape every week, right? Like that's, because I'm weekly, like that's what I like to come and
That's
think of
important.
myself
That's super
sprinkling
important.
sunshine on someone's day once a week, or like when I'm doing, things on my community and sending out something, making sure it's lighthearted, making sure that they know I care about them. And, the fact of the matter is so many of these people have become friends of mine and people I talk to regularly. I mean, in fact, after you and I get off of this call, I'm talking to somebody in LA who's a good friend of mine. She's, she fortunately is not affected by these current fires, but like, I
Thank
met her
goodness.
through, she just pursued a friendship with me. She was excited to know me. We had some things in common. She came on a trip to Italy. She's coming to the Campania trip. And so these people are genuine friends, and I am open to that, right? Like, I'm not like, I am a celebrity and that's not what new media is about. It's about being one of them, being one of everybody. We are part of, we're together, right? Like that's
Yeah.
it.
I want to ask you a real important question, but I just want to touch on a few things that you just said. First of all, I listen to your podcast. I think your voice sounds in podcast form. It's very pleasant, so you don't have to worry about that. I do think that podcasting is getting it up to, especially video podcasts. Now YouTube has stumbled into being a podcast because people want to see reactions. Like you're very emotive, so that's great. But so I think you should try video. It's fine. Because you're very expressive. I'm an expressive person. People want to see expression, but I want to touch on something that's more important because you spoke about it very passionately. When I started this platform, I started with my girlfriend, who's a tiny Asian woman, who we didn't really know that much about wine. We became wine professionals. We're not together anymore, but she had the best palate I tasted with a lot of masters of wines. I tasted like a lot of master somms. I tasted with a lot of big wigs in the industry, and she's one of the best palates I tasted with.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about, and I saw, because she'd complain to me, the difficulties about being a woman in the wine business. And I have a lot of friends that are women. Can you maybe elaborate on that? And because a lot of people don't understand this, the challenge, it's traditionally a male dominated industry.
Mm-hmm.
Things are changing a little bit, especially in Europe. Can you speak on that, being a woman in the wine business?
It has gotten better. Like when I worked for the winery, it was vile. I had somebody who's actually, I can't believe he is still floating around as like he bumps from winery to winery. Just a disgusting, vile human being who's an executive at some of these larger firms. He was like, why don't you stay home and have babies? If you want to like go, if you want to be transferred to be closer to your, at that time, my boyfriend, who was going to become my fiance, like, why don't you just stay home and have babies? Why do I need to transfer you? I mean, it was stuff like that was just so, or I could promote you, but I'm not going to. I'm putting this guy in over you. It was like something he said, you're more qualified than him, but I'm not going to do it. I mean, those are the kinds of things and things that I saw and heard just towards other women as well. It was disgusting. So it's gotten a little bit better in that. I don't think that's quite as acceptable anymore, even at the big companies. The main problem actually being a woman in wine is that you are completely invisible and overlooked. And whatever your opinion is, unless you get one-on-one with someone. So that's what I found is like the best thing is if you're in a conversation, 9 out of 10 times you're getting ignored. You could be the most experienced person there. You could have the best palate there. And I'm sure that your ex-girlfriend told you this. You could be listening to what people are saying and they're completely full of shit and you know it. And they will ignore you. And
full of shit in the wine business. Come on.
I know, right? And you sit there and you say something, and you made a point, and I'll tell you this. This is going to come off as very snotty, but I'm going to say it anyway. I do not go on trips. I refuse to go on press trips unless it's a trip with Europeans. So I will go if someone, but usually they won't allow you to do that. I won't go with Americans because I think that there is a lot more of that here. There's a lot more of the, you're at a press event, you're at a tasting, you are invisible if you are a woman. And if you offer an opinion, it's like, oh, okay. And, especially, gosh, those Napa Valley producers, especially, just awful. I mean, honestly, it is one of the most misogynistic places. If you do have tasting with it, and they all, pretend like they care what you say. They don't care. And it's really offensive. I mean, really, it's not overlooked. We can see it. We know it. We talk about it amongst ourselves. And even, I think even the French who have a bad reputation are not like that. You don't get that. If you are enjoying someone's wine, they are excited to have you there. And the press is not as, oh, you're a woman and you're assertive and you have opinions. I think the British press, especially, like I have some friends that Robert Joseph and others, they love it. They think it's hilarious that I have a lot of opinions. They want to sit with me and hang out with me and hear what I have to say, as opposed to the American men who generally want me to go away. And it's offensive. So I don't even go to any of those events really, because I'm kind of a lone wolf in that way. I do miss out on things because I just don't want to be around negativity. And I have decided, I made a very conscious choice in my life, just as a human, that I was going to jettison anybody that was negative in my life. And that is a lot of the wine industry, to be quite honest. I only want to be around people who are smart and encouraging and fun. And I can also help them. Like, we're in it together. If this is something where people are going to push each other down, I'm out, which is why you don't see me at any of those events. I don't go to them. And I find it really vile.
I judge about 6 or 7 international competitions a year. I'm on press trips all the time. I actually learn more from women than men, especially I love wine competitions with women enologists. Anthropologically, women had to select mates by pheromones. I feel like their sense of smell is better. They know, but also they describe what they're in tune with a lot better than men traditionally. And then also when I'm on press trips, I'm a man, so I like if there are more women than men. So I enjoy. I've seen a shift in the business since I've been in it for about 10 years, which is a good thing. So that's super encouraging. But I do feel bad sometimes for my women colleagues, because a lot of the best things that have happened to me have happened after hours, off the record, but that means there's drinking involved. And when you're in a male-dominated industry,
women look, we can. I mean, I have led some of those drinking expeditions before, but again, I won't do it. I will not go out with people that I think are demeaning or are going to be disgusting. And I think that what you're talking about, and no offense, is places I would not want to go. So of course, I've had some great nights, but mostly they're in Europe with people, some of the I think are amazing.
Well, like we talked about, there's some misogynist circles that I've taken advantage of being a man because it helped me get ahead in my career. Let's talk a little bit about, let's shift gears to something a little bit more cheerful. Since you've been in the business, how has your palate shifted, and what type of wines you were enjoying versus you're now enjoying?
I have to say, like I said, like I said at the beginning with the clothes and who I am, I have always been I've been not very confident in many things in my life. I've definitely changed that. But what I've always done is I have a very good connection between what I taste and again, the communication gene. Like that's kind of it's like the only thing I know how to do. Right. And so I have always been partial to European wines. I'm from New York. That is what I experienced as a young person. When my parents gave me wine, in small quantities when I was younger, they actually were they didn't drink a ton of wine, but they thought California wine was they thought it was lower, because New York is very based on like Italian, French, Spanish wine that's what a lot of New Yorkers, especially at that time, drank. In California in the 80s it was okay. Like it didn't have a lot of respect, right? So like, again, I'm old. So in the 80s and 90s, like my parents never drank California wine. I never saw a bottle of California wine on their table, not one time ever. And so my idea about wine was that it was something that was from Europe and that's what you should drink. And so I got used to those flavors very quickly. And it was very difficult for me, honestly, to appreciate something like this, right? This took me, it's the opposite. It's flipped, right? I thought fine champagne was like awesome. Then I had, a more fruit forward sparkling wine and I did not like it. So, I drank Chianti Classico before I had California Cab. So it was always, I think I've always had that. Most people evolve from fruitier wines to less fruity, more restrained wines, right? It's always like, you start in California and in Burgundy. I wouldn't say that's necessarily true. I've always had a little bit more of an appreciation for these more subtle wines. And it's been a journey actually to appreciate the simpler, more like hedonistic pleasures, which I just, I still have a hard time with some Cabernet, like big Cabernet, like we were talking about the bigger Zinfandels. I don't really like high alcohol wines if they're off balance. If they feel hot, they feel off balance. If they're balanced, I don't care. Washington State has often really high alcohol, but they're very balanced. But New World wines are harder for me than Old World wines, which is a bizarre thing to say, but it's just the way that I came to wine. I came to wine through the Old World, and that hasn't changed. My preference is always for the Old World. And especially like, I'm not a rich woman. So if I'm looking for value, I'm not looking in California, I can say. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, who knows what's going to happen now. So let's say we transport you to a desert island. Can bring one white, one red. It doesn't have, it could be a specific label. It could not be, or a region, or a great, what is it?
I mean, like my instant thing is either Riesling or Fiano, like Alsace Riesling or Fiano, and then Bordeaux or Côte Rôtie, but I can't decide between them. So, it'd have to be one.
Those are all good choices. Those are all great choices.
That's pretty much, yeah. It would have to be probably Pomerol, because oh my God, it's like drinking velvet, but I do love a great aged left bank wine too. So I don't know. I mean, it's like, Pauliac, you can't really beat that. But yeah, and on the whites, I mean, like we already discussed, Riesling and Fiano are kind of my absolute favorites. So probably Fiano. I think I've come around to it more than Riesling.
So what's the best way for people to find out about your trips? Is it just your website? And then
you have to be a patron. So in order to be, yes, you have to be part of the community. And honestly, we really, the trips are for people who are really kind of dedicated and part of the community. They're special. They're small. There's only 2 a year. And we try, again, it's all since this is a subset of the listener base, right? So like if you're watching this and you want to just listen to the podcast, that's fine. But if you want to get more involved and like be part of something, then that's the Patreon base. And I mean, it's cheap. It's $2 a month or $21 a year to start, right? Like, you know, and then you can get more benefits. You know, you get free classes and more interaction with me if you have a higher level of membership. But yeah, I mean, it's not a really high bar for a lot of content because the podcast, only the current year of the podcast is available to the public. The rest is all on Patreon. So if you're a patron, you get access to all, 500 episodes that happened before now. So yeah, and there's a lot there. Also, there's like hundreds of posts because I post all the time. So yeah, and the trips, you get access to the trips, right? You can't go on a trip unless you're part of Patreon. So yeah, I mean, I think it's important for me because again, I don't want to go places with people that I don't know. So the people that are on these trips are generally people that I know through the community. And it usually turns out to be this just beautiful thing. I mean, we just went to Tuscany in the fall and it was just, what a great group. Like they all love each other. I love them. There's so many people from DC. So when I had the DC event that I was talking about with like 50, they were all hugging each other and seeing each other. I mean, it's just, I really am looking for like true community. So, that's what Patreon is. And I know, some people balk at, oh, I don't want to pay $20 a year for it. Well, you know what? It's probably the cheapest, as my friend Tom Wark says, it's the cheapest subscription in wine. So,
Elizabeth Schneider, Wine for Normal People podcast. Find it wherever you find your podcasts. Thank you so much. Really enjoyed the conversation. I hope to do this in person too in the future.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it.